Hey everyone, it's me, Johnny G, back in the kitchen again with another Arknights themed cooking video. And today, we are diving into something special themed after the Arknights Retracing Our Steps event. Now, if you've played the event and you've read the story or listened to it, whatever the case may be, you may have heard a couple of food items mentioned. And this is where I always pull my ideas from. In the Retracing Our Steps event, up on Mount Carlin, Rhine Lab has established a research center. And in this research center, we get to see Muelsyse and Astgenne and many others working. And during this course of the story, Muelsyse actually gives Astgenne a cheese and berry pastry from Kjerag. She says it's a cheese and berry pastry with a honey sugar glaze and it's a Kjerag specialty. Now, this pastry was actually also mentioned, if I'm remembering correctly, in the Rides to Lake Silberneherze event back when Dagenbreaker was released. So it's not the first time this was mentioned in Kjerag. Now there's other foods and things that are out there like the fondue that's mentioned, as well as the milk and various other items that are Kjerag customs and specialties. But we're gonna do this pastry. And it's a simple recipe. It's not as in-depth as things that we've made before here on the channel, but it does carry some similarities. For example, we're gonna make homemade puff pastry just like we did for the Muelsyse for Lapland. And then we are going to make a homemade berry jam that's going to be the filling, as well as we'll mix up a cream cheese filling that goes inside and the honey sugar glaze. So it'll be relatively simple, but in the end, it's still guaranteed to give a tasty and simple treat that you all should enjoy and you could easily make yourself. With that, let's get started on making the Kjerag cheese and berry pastry with honey sugar glaze. All right, so we're over here at the counter and we are going to start with making our puff pastry. Now, as always, I like to take my jewelry off. Already washed my hands, so we are ready to go. And the first step to do this is we got to cut this butter into cubes. We need basically 2.5 sticks of butter or 1 1/4 cups, very cold butter, salted, and we need to cut it into cubes. And once we get to the part here where we mix it all together, this is going into a food processor. But for now, I've got my cutting board. We're gonna unwrap this and go from there. Now, if you're not familiar, of course, 1 stick of butter here is 8 tablespoons, typically your common butter. And this is going to be 1/2 cup for 1 stick. So 2 sticks is 1 whole cup, and then another 1/2 stick is your 1/4 cup. So we have 1 1/4 here. So let me go ahead and cube this up, and then we'll take it from there. Start with this one. And very simple. You can do this with all the sizes, but I like to split it in half. And this butter's been sitting out, so it's not very, very cold, but we'll still enjoy it here. And now I have 4 long, cubish-like strips here. But then, that's all I do. And now I have a bunch of butter cubes that'll separate as we go. So let me unwrap these and cut the rest up. All right, butter is cubed, so let's go ahead and set that aside, provided we don't knock it off of our cutting board here as we gather our other ingredients. So for the rest of this, we need very cold water, salt, and flour. We're gonna use 2 cups of all-purpose flour, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and about 1/2 cup of very cold water. Now, the one thing about this is we're going to put this all into a food processor and blend it all up real quick. And once it's done, we'll roll it out and then fold it and get it chilling for a little bit while we make our other ingredients. So I've got my food processor right here, and I'm gonna get it plugged in as we get ready to put this together. So now that our butter is all chopped up, the first thing we need is we need flour and salt. I've got my trusty measuring cup container here, and we'll get out my chickens. So again, 2 cups of all-purpose flour here. We'll just kind of even this out. And you could take a tool of some sort and flatten it, you know, just scrape it across the edge as long as you have a nice kind of even topped measuring cup. You get some wonky looking ones out there that I've seen, but mine have a nice flat edge. So there we go. There's our 2 cups of flour. Get that out of the way here. And next up, we need a 1/4 teaspoon of our salt. Now, I don't exactly have a 1/4 teaspoon in sight, so I'm going to use a half here. We're going to use a half, of course. So, about a half there. And salt. Now, there's salt in the butter as well, so we won't need that. That's nothing to really worry about. We don't need extra salt, but you could use unsalted butter in this and then add additional salt. So you could maybe increase it to a half a teaspoon or 3/4 of a teaspoon. And I will put the recipes as usual that I'm going to borrow from in the description, so you guys can check those and kind of get an idea if you want to follow along, do this yourself. You can use those recipes and see those kind of suggestions and other things. Now, we have the flour and the salt in our food processor here. We're going to add about 3/4 cup of the cold butter in the cubes, and then we're going to pulse it until it's absorbed. Now, as I said, a half a cup is 1 stick. So I kind of have this a little bit messed up now, but 3/4 cup, we're looking at about 1.5 sticks, which leaves us with roughly 1 stick of butter left. So, because I don't exactly know how to count this, since I chopped it all up, we're going to set aside what looks like roughly 1 stick. And we're going to close this up and pulse it. It says about 10 to 12 1-second pulses, and then we'll add the remaining cold butter, pulse 2 or 3 times, and then we'll add the cold water and pulse just a little bit more until we can form a dough ball. So let's start. Okay, so there was 12. Now, if you can look down in here, you can see that it's already starting to crumble. The butter's starting to pull together with the flour, and we're using the blade attachment with our food processor. Some of them will come with a plastic blade-like attachment. You don't want to use that. You want the actual metal blade for this. So, let's continue and add the rest of our butter. Okay, and we are going to pulse again for about 3 more times. Okay, this is just to combine that all together. Now, you do want the butter to still be a little solid. We're going to add this water that we have. We need 1/2 cup of very cold water. So, what this is going to do is going to help this form a dough ball. But by having the butter in little chunks like this, little bits, when you make the puff pastry, the butter is going to continue to like spread and help it to puff up, help it to bake. So, let me go ahead and measure out 1/2 cup of cold water here. I have a large one that the ice melted, but as you can see, there's condensation and stuff on it. This is still nice and cold. We put some ice in it just to chill it for a little while I was preparing. Let's get that poured in and then continue our process here. Okay. And again, this is going to be about 4 to 5 more times just until the dough comes together to form a ball. Do not over process it, because if you overwork it, it's not going to puff up well. So let's do this. Okay, now it is still crumbly, but that's okay. We'll form this into a dough ball here as we go. So I'm going to unhook the food processor and take this off. We're going to set this aside. Now, we're going to get ready and flour my horrible countertop here so that we can pour this out and get it rolled. As you guys know, my countertops are not the greatest. These are what I had when I moved into this house, and well, they've got stains and other things on it, so I need to get new ones someday. So if you guys want to help me to get new countertops someday, the best thing you could do is subscribe to the channel and help me get to 1,000 so that I can get monetized someday and start saving for a new change in my countertops. Okay. All right, so I'm just gonna place a pile of flour out here so I have it. Close up our container and get it out of here. And now we are going to lightly flour our surface. And then what we're gonna do, you can see it is starting to clump together here. So we're gonna clean off the blade because we won't need it anymore. Be very careful because these are very sharp. You don't want to cut yourself. It's usually best if you can to use a little bit of a spatula or something like a rubber spatula. So I'm not going to really play with the edges of the blades here. I'm just going to push off as best as I can. And then we're going to set this aside. And now we can reach in here and kind of mess with it a little bit as we need. And as I said, we've got our surface lightly floured. So as we can, we'll pull this together and then we're going to get it out onto the surface. Try not to mess with it too much. You want to stick with working with it lightly because like most doughs, this will be kind of bad if you overwork it. If you mess with it too much, it's not going to fluff up. So what we want to do, get it together as best as we can, and we are going to knead this roughly 10 times. Then we'll roll it out with the rolling pin and get it ready for storage. So let's get this, pull it together, keep making it a nice dough, and then knead it. Whoop. Flip it a little bit there. So we'll say that's 1, 2, 3. We're gonna kind of reflour here because it's starting to stick. And again, lightly, don't overdo it, because then you'll dry it out. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. More flour, just to cover. And we'll pick up the rest of this. 9, 10. I'm gonna place our dough down. Grab a rolling pin here, and take the rest, whatever we can of our flour here, scoop up some, and get the rolling pin itself floured. And we are going to try and roll out a rectangle roughly 12 by 18 inches, or 30 by 45 centimeters-ish. Whoop, we're sticky. So, a little more flour on this. Okay. Now you want to try to have this as even as possible. And as you can see, I just pressed it a little bit when I was done to push out the edge here. But this is roughly our 12 by 18 size. What we're going to do is we're going to fold this like an envelope. Fold it in half and then wrap it in plastic and refrigerate for 1 to 2 hours. Now if you're in a hurry, 15 to 20 minutes in the freezer counts for about an hour of refrigerator time. So that's just an idea if you need to freeze it. If you're in a hurry to make something quick, you want to make a quick little dessert like this, that's just an idea for what you can do. So let's go ahead and carefully lift this up and we'll fold this in half. And in half again. And let's get our plastic wrap. Let's get it covered. Use this to kind of help lift as we can. Careful, because I can feel that it's stuck to the counter a little bit. But now we are flipped over. That's okay. That's not too bad. Fully covered. And let's take it to the fridge. All right, now that that's in the fridge, before we continue, let's clean up this counter. All right, so next up, we're going to separate an egg. For this part of the recipe, we're gonna go ahead and make our cream cheese filling for the pastries, but we only need an egg yolk. So we're gonna separate the yolk from the white. So let's go ahead and crack our egg. Just try to be careful here. I'll split it right down the middle. And then we'll do, kind of split it awkwardly, but you know what? It still works. We can pull this easily here, and we'll use this part to kind of scoop, pour the yolk into, pull more of the white out. And actually drained it very, very well there. I don't really have to mess with it too much more, so let's put that yolk in there. Get rid of the shell, and then clean up our counter. And it looks like we got a tiny little bit of shell in there with our yolk, so we'll get a spoon and get that out. I've got this little tablespoon that I used earlier, so grab that and get rid of the shell. Very quick and easy. Boom. Now, we'll set aside the white, because again, we don't need that. We do need a bowl, and we're gonna use this mixing bowl. I'm gonna get a whisk, and I've had this cream cheese sitting out to soften for a little bit. We're using an 8-ounce block, and I'm using full fat, preferably. The recipe does say that the one that I'm using to make this is that if you use fat-free, it doesn't come out as well for this filling. So you could use full fat or I believe half fat, but I would prefer the full fat because, I mean, it's meant to be a sweet treat here, not, anything less than. So let's go ahead and get our cream cheese out of the package. Ooh, it's sticking pretty well from softening, so we need a rubber spatula and a whisk. Okay, so we got a Christmas-themed rubber spatula here. That'll work to do what we need to. We'll scrape this down, get it all cleaned off, so that way we're not wasting any. Now, we can get rid of our packaging. Put this together. Okay, we'll set that aside. And now, this is softened. It should be easy to start whipping up. Now you could use a mixer or something like that. I'm gonna be hard on myself and get a little elbow grease. And like I said, we use a whisk and just start spreading this a little bit for the purpose of it. And we'll use that rubber spatula again here soon. But again, use a hand mixer or a stand mixer, whatever you're more comfortable with. So let's now add our egg yolk. And we need 3 tablespoons of granulated sugar. There's 1, 2, 3. Okay. And now we can start mixing this together. And as you can see, as we mix it, it starts to kind of pull apart a little bit more. It's starting to become smoother, lighter to work with. It's not as heavy and sticky. And it's starting to get a nice glossier look to it. And the next thing we need is about a half teaspoon of vanilla extract. So now you can use other kinds of extract. Almond extract is good with this. That's one thing mentioned in the one recipe that I'm referencing. But me personally, anytime I make something with like a cream cheese filling or frosting, I just like to go with vanilla, especially if we're using sugar already, because it kind of keeps it in that sweeter range. And I'm not looking for it to be nuttier this time, especially with the berries that I'm going to be using. So I'll just stick with vanilla and we'll see how that goes flavor-wise for it. But let's mix this up a bit more to blend in that extract. And as you can see again, look, it's definitely lighter, shinier. And before we finish up, we'll get that spatula back. We're gonna scrape down the sides of the bowl here, just to make sure we get everything. Get all that good stuff. Okay, get the bottom scraped up too. And then we'll kind of clean that off. Set it aside until we need it again. And give this one last mixing. Okay, there is our cream cheese filling. Now next up, we are going to make a powdered sugar honey glaze for this. This will get drizzled across the top when everything's all done. So again, not regular sugar, we're gonna use powdered sugar or confectioner's sugar. And with this, there's other different ways that you can do this. You can do powdered sugar with a little bit of vanilla and some water or milk to break it down. We are going to use the powdered sugar with honey and a little splash of vanilla extract. So we need about 3/4 cup of your confectioner's sugar or powdered sugar. And if you go a little bit over, it's okay. It's not going to be the worst thing in the world. So I'm not going to worry too much about making this even, because sometimes these recipes tend to give you an idea of what we are doing with the recipe. They give you an exact amount, but sometimes you want a little bit more and it tends to be just a little bit too little. We're just going to add a small splash, roughly 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of our vanilla extract. And then, since I'm doing this honey, I'm not exactly sure how much to go for, so we're going to kind of feel this out as we mix it. And I'm going to start with roughly, let's go with about 1 tablespoon of honey. And I'm using 100% raw honey here. And we need another whisk. And then let's start to mix this together. Now, as you can see, the honey is kind of making this stick and clump up really thick. So we're going to add a little more, but I might add a splash of milk or water to thin this a little bit. What about another tablespoon here? And it's creating some like little chunks in here. So I think that's definitely the key. We need an extra moisture element to break this down further. So let's do that. Let's grab some milk. Okay. Now I'm going to add about 1 tablespoon of milk to start. Yeah, let's go with that. And if we need more, we'll add more. But we'll just mix this. And that's actually already looking much better. It's coming out more like a glaze. Very much more like a glaze. It's a little thick though yet. So let's get it stirred together a little better. And then we'll add maybe about 1 tablespoon more of milk, maybe 1/2. We'll start with 1/2, just because you don't want to make it too thin. No, actually, the consistency of the way that's pulling, I think that's perfect. It feels thicker, but as you lift it, it's giving that nice drizzly texture. and kind of consistency to it. So I actually think we're going to be good with the 1 tablespoon of milk. That was the key. We just needed a little bit of moisture. And now we have our sugar honey glaze. Let's set that aside. All right, so far we've made our pastry dough. We've made our sugar honey glaze and our cream cheese filling. We still need to make the berries. So we'll do that next, but before we do that, we're going to prepare an egg wash to go on the pastries. So I do have about 2 tablespoons of cold water here. We're going to crack an egg into that and add a little bit of sugar, and we're going to beat that up with a fork here. So let's go ahead and crack our egg. Okay. My eggs this time around seem to have a little thicker of shells, which is kind of odd. I'm used to having them a little more fragile, but that's okay. We're going to put, I don't have another teaspoon on me right now, so we're going to put roughly 1 of these teaspoons of some sugar in. Now it says to use coarse sugar, but I don't have that, so I'm just going to use regular sugar, since we'll be using that for the berries. And let's go ahead and use the fork. Beat that. Whoops. Should have used a little bit bigger of a bowl, but I like making messes. Who doesn't? And this will get brushed on the pastry once they're ready to go in the oven. It'll help to give them that nice golden coloring on the outside. Okay, that's ready. So now, again, let's clean up our mess. All right, so the next step here is going to be making the berry jam, which isn't going to take very long, 20 minutes to half an hour tops once we get it in the saucepan here. But first, we needed to clean our berries, obviously. So we have about 2 cups of blueberries and raspberries here. They're already washed in a bowl and separate. And we have roughly 2 cups of our strawberries here because we're going to make a mixed berry jam. Now, the strawberries are, of course, on the large side, so it didn't take much to fill those up. But, of course, the size difference between the blueberries and raspberries and the strawberries, they kind of need chopped up roughly. It doesn't have to be perfect, but we're going to go ahead and slice these down a little bit so that we can put them in together, and then we'll pour it all in the pot. Now, as we cook things down, I will mash them a little bit to help to disperse them and break them down more. But we'll get everything going here. Let's get the berries first taken care of here. We'll move them off here onto the counter. And first, they each have a little stem. We're going to slice that off. And then I'm just going to slice them down like this. Yeah, we'll cut them again. Better safe than sorry. It's not often that I do stuff like this, but the smaller they are, the easier they will be to break down. And now we have all our strawberries roughly chopped up here, different shapes, sizes, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be perfect. The one thing, I'll remind you guys again, I'm not a professional cook. I have worked in kitchens, professional kitchens, but I'm not a professional cook, a professional chef. I do things at home for fun and for enjoyment and to feed my family. So it doesn't need to be perfect. It will taste good in the end, hopefully. So now we're going to go ahead and get these in a pot and get ready for the next step to cook these down and make our jam. All right, so next up, we want to put our pot on medium to high heat. So we've got that ready, and we're going to go ahead and put all our berries in here. Strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, the works. Get them all in the pot, looking delicious. Last of them out of the bowl there. And then we need to put in some sugar and some lemon juice. So I've got my container of sugar here. We need 2 cups. So we have a total of 6 cups of fruit. And we're using 2 cups of our granulated sugar. That cup was a little bit under, so I'm going to add a tad more into this one. Poof, there we go. And then 2 tablespoons of bottled lemon juice. 1, 2. Now that'll help to cook it down, of course, but the lemon juice will also help for being able to store and preserve this afterwards. So now, medium to high heat, we are going to gently stir this occasionally and get this to start going to a boil. Once it starts to boil and starts to cook down a bit, we'll reduce the heat, put it down to medium, and then just cook, stirring for about 20 minutes or until this actually cooks down into a jam and starts to thicken up. And like I said, we have the masher on the side just in case we need it. We don't want the sugar or anything to burn, so as I said, stir it. Get this nice and kind of coated up, and you can see the sugar starting to dissolve already. You can see the heat, and you can see liquid starting to come out of the berries. So this is good. This is what we want. This is a nice mixed berry jam, common berries that you'd find anywhere, so it's nothing that's going to be incredibly hard to find or any kind of exotic thing to it. So I would imagine these would be common berries you'd find in Kjerag or somewhere on Terra that would make this easy to import to Kjerag to make these pastries. All right. You can see the liquid is starting to thin a little bit more. So things are thinning down. It's heating up more. I can feel and hear a little bit of like bubbling and stuff going on at the bottom already, kicking the heat up more. So it's going to really start to boil here soon. I'm going to get a plate out that I can sit my spoon on so I'm not adding berry stains to my counter. And let's give this a little bit and keep checking it and stirring it as we go until we get this up to that boil. And now, as you see, we've got some bubbling. It's starting to pick up a little bit more here. And we're starting to get close to that boil. So we want to give it some more stirring. We don't want this to burn. If it starts to burn, then we'll be in trouble. We've got to get it to boil before we can let it just roll. And like I said, once it's up and really fully boiling, then we reduce the heat back to medium. And we let it go for, as I said, about 20 minutes, and we'll stir frequently. All right, so we have it boiling, and I've turned it down to medium heat now, and it is smelling good, looking good. We can stir it here occasionally as we go. We're gonna keep an eye on this for about 20 minutes, 20 to 25 minutes, and make sure that it starts to cook down and thicken. We'll stir frequently, and we're going to make sure that this thickens up to become a good solid jam. Now, once this is finished, again, you'll be able to store it, use it for whatever's left over from this. But you can also, if you're into canning or anything like that, you could can this in sterile jars, put the lids on it, preserve it, store it, and keep it for later on. As it is, it will last a little while, but not super long in your refrigerator. Maybe about 2 weeks, roughly. So you'll want to use it pretty quickly if you're not planning on canning it or storing it. So we'll keep using it up here. We'll use what we need for this today. And then of course, my family will eat it on, toast or something for breakfast. But, another fun thing about this for us Earth people, non-Terran people, we like things like Pop-Tarts, and this would make a nice homemade fresh fruit filling for Pop-Tarts. So you can make homemade ones that way. A neat little idea. But we're not here to talk about Earth food. We're talking about food on Terra. So let's continue to stir this and keep tabs on it for, again, about 20 minutes or a little bit longer. Okay, so we are about 10 minutes into the boiling process. And as you guys can see already, this is looking much different. It's very, very, very much cooked down, and we're starting to thicken up. So I have to stir it a little more frequently now. Now we're still on the medium heat as it requires, but because of the fact that it's thickening, because of the fact that it's starting to get to a different consistency and the berries are cooking down, it's starting to stick a little bit more. So we want to keep it from doing that. So I'm going to stir much more frequently now for the final 10 minutes. And actually, I've already been stirring for probably about 2 or 3 since about 13 or 12 minutes left. But yeah, we're going to stir it a little more frequently, keep working this until it thickens further, and hopefully by the time we hit our 20 minutes, we should be where we need to be to let this cool and then get ready to start forming our pastries to go in the oven. We'll check back in a few. Now we are down under the 4-minute mark now, and it is even thicker yet, as you guys can see. I actually turned the heat down just a tad. It's like just under medium for me, only because it was beginning to bubble to the point where it was like splashing onto my wrist as I was stirring here and kind of burning my wrist a little bit. So I turned it down just a little bit to try and reduce some of that. It just did it again onto my forearm. But it is getting super thick already. So we probably won't have to go beyond the 20-minute mark here. So I'm going to turn it down just a tad more so that I don't burn myself further. And we will stir these last couple of minutes away and then get this off the heat. All right, so we are in the last 30 seconds here. And I just went ahead and turned the heat off actually. So this will be a full 20 minutes, but I've turned the heat off because as you can see, it is nice and thick. It is cooked down very well. The berries are not like full-size chunks of berry or anything anymore. It's cooked down nicely. So we are going to move this off the burner. That's going to go ahead and cool off the burner, off the side here. And while it's cooling, it'll continue to thicken more. But you guys saw how thick it was already, which gives us a nice consistency for what we want for our pastries. But we're going to let it cool for a few minutes so that it can be a little bit better before we go ahead and assemble everything and put it in the oven. Now, as an extra process here, I'm fine with it, my family's fine with it, so we're not too worried. But some people have issues with the texture of the berry seeds and things like that. And as you could have seen probably as I was stirring there, you could see whole strawberry seeds and things floating around in this jam. If you don't like something like that, you could always use a metal sieve or a piece of cheesecloth or something and work this jam through it to clean out some of those seeds and any kind of leftover solids that you may not want. But in the end, that's up to you. That's your preference, whether or not you want to do that. But for now, we're going to let that cool. And then the final step will be assembling our pastries. All right, now, so our puff pastry has chilled. It's been about an hour and a half, hour to an hour and a half since we put it in to chill. So we're going to go ahead and open it up here and get ready to use it. Now, if you don't want to make homemade puff pastry, like, again, this is the second time I've done it. I did it for the Millefoie video, and I'm doing it here. For this, if you don't want to use homemade, you can easily go buy a piece of store-bought or a box. It comes in a box usually in the freezer section of your grocery store. So, looks like it's stuck a little bit here on the one spot, probably when we folded it, which, no big deal. We'll get it lifted up, and then gently pry it apart. Just like when you mix it, you don't want to overdo it with this part either, because if you mess with it and it really gives you trouble, mess with it too much and then you end up with issues. It's overworked and it kind of doesn't puff up well. As you can see, mine already kind of broke a little bit on the creases, so that kind of is going to make it nice here for me. Well, what we're going to do, these are not going to be the prettiest pastries, but I'm going to go ahead and cut right down each of these spots. And we'll get rid of our thing here, our plastic wrap. Now, like I said, these will not be the prettiest of pastries. I'm not worried about that. I'm gonna flatten this out a little bit for each one. Not even gonna bother with flouring the surface. I'm just gonna gently press it, because again, we don't wanna overdo it, but I'm gently gonna press it so that we're even everywhere. And what I'm going to do now, we cut it down here. We're gonna go ahead and I'll cut each one into 3. So we'll have about 9 total pastries here. So let's go ahead and split each of these into 3, and we'll set them aside as we go here. And of course, the middle will make you the prettiest ones because, well, you know, look at that nice rectangle shape. And then cut and cut. And then you can get some like this that are a little bit smaller size, fit for maybe a younger one, a little lupo in the crowd. Next up, I've got a baking sheet that's already lined with parchment paper. So we're going to lay these out on it, space them out just so that they have enough space and they're able to bake when it's time. Okay, that's so you can see it. So now there's our 9 bases for our pastry. The next thing we want to do, you don't want to cut all the way through, but you want to give a little bit of a score. And we're going to score it in the inside here, the pastry. No more than like a 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch inward on each side. We'll just do a basic line, go down a little bit. This way, that'll be the outside, that'll puff up and kind of create a well in the center of our pastry, where our filling will be. All right, so we've went ahead and we've got all of them scored here. Now, you don't want to cut all the way through the dough. Roughly about a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch on each side. And what we're going to do now is we're going to start with our cream cheese filling that we made here earlier. And we are going to place a heaping tablespoon, roughly, of the filling on each of these, right in the middle. I'll go ahead and just plop it down on each one, and then we'll worry about filling it after. And now, we'll just go around and gently give it a little bit of a spread. Not too much. It'll kind of work itself around as it heats up in the oven. Now, while you're doing this, you want to preheat your oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. I already have mine preheated. It's already done. It's beeped. It's ready to go. So when it's time to bake these, we can stick them right in. They're ready to go. In the middle of each one, you want to try and create, if you can, a very slight well. Just a little bit of a divot. Press down in the center so that you can put the jam in there. We'll do that next. And that'll kind of sit and hopefully not run out. Now, we've got our homemade mixed berry jam that has thickened up a little more since it's cooled. It's sat here off to the side, but it's still a bit warm. But considering that it's going in the oven, it's not too bad. So we're not going to worry too much about letting it cool more, but you're supposed to put about 1 to 1.5 teaspoons of jam in the middle. So we'll go ahead and put a dollop in each little cream cheese well here. All right, so there. We've got our cheese mixture and jam mixture in here. And we have plenty of jam left over. So while you're doing this, you could always double your pastry recipe or even triple it for the amount of jam. And of course, you would have to also account for doubling, potentially tripling your cream cheese mixture, which I do have a little bit left of that in the bowl, but not too much. So there's not enough for like a whole nother batch. So you definitely would want to double it. However, again, you would just have to account for things if you want to make more. Now, the last thing that we need to do though, is we need to put our egg wash on here. Now, I do have that set aside still, and we're gonna use a brush to put this on the side. Now, I know I've complained about this before, but I'm still too lazy and have yet to buy a pastry brush. So I'm using the tip of a grill brush to go ahead and brush on our egg wash. And we're just gonna coat around the outer edge. And if you want, you could sprinkle it with some sugar, but I actually mixed some sugar into the egg wash, which is, you know, it's kind of up to you how you do it. But this will just more or less give a nice golden flakiness to the outer edge as it bakes. Now, another thing to kind of be careful with when you're working with puff pastry is try not to get the egg on the very edge if you can. Now, they say, and I believe I mentioned this in the millefeuille video for, Lapland's millefeuille, that you could potentially stop the puff pastry from puffing up on the sides if you brush the sides with the egg wash, because it kind of might create a seal. So you want to try to be careful with that, but that's one of those things where it's kind of up to you. The middle should still puff up and get crispy and flaky, but it's just something to watch out for, and try to keep your egg wash brushing just on top. All right, so they're egg washed, everything's ready to go. We're gonna go ahead and put these in the oven, again, 400 degrees Fahrenheit, for about 14 to 16 minutes. Let's go ahead and put them in. All right, it has been 16 minutes in the oven. We're gonna go ahead and get our tray of pastries out and take a look. Ooh. Well, they've definitely puffed up a little bit, and we've gotten a little bit golden around the edges. They have a bit of squishiness and whatnot to them. I think we don't want to give it too much longer, because as you can see, the cream cheese is starting to brown as well, and it's puffing up. I think we're going to give it just a few more minutes, maybe 2, maybe 3 more minutes in the oven to try and brown those edges just a little bit more. So let's go ahead and put those in. And now, in the meantime, while we put that back in, I have what I just kind of set this out on, a wire rack, a wire cooling rack that I just have towels on to be able to absorb the heat temporarily. And we're gonna set that on here to cool when it's done. We'll let them cool a few minutes, and then we'll drizzle that glaze on, which I went ahead and transferred that to a little container just so I can store it when it's done. But we'll drizzle that honey sugar glaze over top and then get ready to give them a taste test. So let's give them these last few minutes. We'll be right back. Okay, our timer went off again. And like I said, we're not giving it much longer, provided we don't dump them. But they did get a little bit more golden, just by a little. And they're a little bit crustier, so I don't want to mess with them anymore. I don't want to overdo them, so we're going to let this sit here to cool now. Give it a few minutes. After it cools down, we'll get that glaze on, and then we'll find out what these Kjerag pastries are like. All right, so these are nice and cool now, and we have but one small remaining step before we can officially do our taste test. That step, we need to add the sugar honey glaze that we made. And like I said, I transferred it over to this little container so I can store what's left over, because as you can see, there's plenty here and more than what I'm going to use for this. But let's go ahead and just take our spoon and lightly drizzle all over each pastry so we get it nice and covered with this glaze. And you can swirl it around, give some fancy little patterns if you'd like, whatever you want to do, just to add a little flair to it. I like using the spoon and just kind of going all over the place because you can make it yourself, make it your own, I should say. And with this, we'll just get plenty of it all over each one of these, put the leftover glaze away, and then we'll take one and give it a try. Okay, that is complete. So let's stick our spoon aside here, and we are done. All right, so we are finished. You guys saw us do the glaze there, and now we're ready to do the taste test. And of course, I had to pick that nice, perfectly rectangular one to give the try to. Now, pastry feels crispy, it smells delicious, looks delicious. I can't wait to give this a try. It kind of gives me a holiday food type of vibe. Now, obviously this isn't the best job, and I do think that the pastry came out a little bit better just from a look than it did when I did the millefeuille. Because if you go back and watch that video, I did mention that I feel like I might have overmixed it or overmessed because it was my first time working with puff pastry. This is only time number 2, and I feel like I have at least a little bit of improvement. It looks flakier, it feels a little better. It's still not super puffy, so maybe there's something that I'm still doing wrong, but I'm looking at it and thinking I did better. We're gonna taste it and hopefully find that we did better, and then we'll see what we think of this overall fun-looking dish. So, is this Kjerag delicacy worth it? Let's find out. Pick it up. Here's our first bite. Wow. I think I might make miniature ones of these to give out as a bit of a holiday treat this year. Very, very good. The puff pastry, even though it isn't really puffed up, is definitely better. It has more crispiness to it, more flakiness to it, and it has a little bit of a crunch that I'm getting in my mouth as I eat it. I like it. And the cream cheese, that portion of this and the honey sugar glaze are very good. They add a little bit more of the sweetness. And while yes, we did have sugar, you guys saw we put 2 cups of sugar in with the 6 cups of berries, and the berries of course have natural sugar as well, but there was that element of tartness. We have strawberries, blueberries, and raspberries to make this homemade jam, but it's got a tartness level to it that just kind of takes away a lot of that sweetness that would have come from the sugar, and I think it balances well with the cream cheese and the honey sugar glaze. This is definitely a fun treat from the world of Terra. And again, something that we can easily make in our own world because, well, I got the idea from the game and looked up some recipes and managed to make something that we already have here. So let's take another bite and continue to enjoy this. It's just the perfect size of a treat as well. Tastes wonderful. I want to make them again, for sure. So have you guys had anything similar to this? Have you made something like this? Let me know in the comments. And so far, is there any other fun food ideas that you've heard of in the game or read about during one of the stories that you'd like to see me make here on the channel? If so, let me know down in the comments, and we'll go ahead and put that on the list of things that we will make for the world of Terra and bring to you. And with this, please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new and want to see more fun Arknights content, whether it's the gameplay, this, or even the newest thing that we just set out on, a fandom journey, where we did the introductory scene for the Retracing Our Steps event. We're planning on doing more. I'm assembling more of a cast so that we can complete a fandom of the entire event, and then I'd like to go back and do more fandubbing of the main theme and the other side stories and other things, because I'm a voice actor and I want to have a lot of fun doing this. So check out the other fun Arknights content that I have, including more of my cooking videos. And with that, that is the newest episode of Cooking with Arknights, and we will see you in the next one.